It's so funny because one of the reasons I stopped doing the work that I was doing before was because I hadn't figured out how to be really effective with my time and still really balanced so that I could bring my whole better self to work. It's one of the things that I work with so many of my clients on today. When I started working for myself, I slipped into old patterns. I slipped into those old habits. Now I'm not just working for somebody else. This is my business. This is really important to me. The work is really important to me, and it's my livelihood. It's really important to me to do that. Figuring out what are the tasks, what is the time that's really going to be effective in what I'm trying to do is critical.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, and even $100,000 weeks. Before Purple Circle, I've grown several 7- and 8-figure career coaching businesses myself, and have been a consultant at 2 career coaching businesses that are doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets Podcast. I'm Pedro, and today's guest is Dana Zellers, an executive coach who helps leaders and teams move from constant reactivity to intentional impact. After more than 20 years in high-pressure roles at companies like Uber and Twitter, she saw firsthand that working harder doesn't create better results. It creates burnout. Through her career control framework, Dana helps organizations build clearer foundations, smarter systems, and stronger relationships so the right work actually gets done. So her focus is simple: fewer hours, better decisions, and performance that doesn't depend on exhaustion. Welcome to the show, Dana.
Thank you so much for having me, Pedro. I'm really excited for our conversation.
Excited that you're here. Okay. And, I like to go back to the origin story, the first issue of the comic book, So before we get into what you do now, I'm curious how this all actually started. What was going on in your life when coaching became more than just an idea?
Yeah, no, I think the starting point is always so great because it tends to resonate with what we do and who we help. I was one of those busy professionals who was spending a lot of hours in the office, and I was successful. I was moving up. I was respected. I was doing projects. But there were a couple things that were happening. One is it was at my own personal expense. I was probably ignoring my personal life, ignoring my health a bit. All of those things that we do when work becomes our emphasis. It also turns out that I wasn't as focused on the things that I really wanted to be doing at work. I was working with a lot of politics and things that weren't the core of my job and weren't really, honestly, as fun. And I found that a lot of the people that I worked with were in a similar space. We liked what we did. We liked who we worked with, what we were working on, but there was something that was missing. And for a lot of us, it felt like there wasn't a solution. So I started hearing more and more about coaching. And initially, I thought this was just another tool I wanted to add to my toolkit. I was in a role where I worked with a lot of other people, and I thought this strategy could be something that would help me. So I went and got a coaching certification, and it was really eye-opening to me. The idea that I could work with people in a different way to really have an impact on changing their quality of life, as well as improving the output and the product and all of the things that we actually cared about. So that became a call for me to do that full time, which is what I am doing today.
I love the fact that you were like, hey, I'm just going to use this tool here, have some fun and deliver, a bit of more performance. I don't know. And it turns out, hey, you know what? This is actually what I'm doing now, and how that shifted, just by taking that course or training or certificate. I love that. How you didn't plan on doing that. It was just natural. So I want to understand, at what point did it stop feeling like a side thing or a calling, and it start feeling like an actual business you are responsible for?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So when I started my certification in 2016, the program that I was in really gave us a lot of tools, a lot of practice. We were partnered up. We were doing coaching. We were working with mentor coaches, but they really encouraged us to start working with people right away, to start getting more and more of that experience. And so I started really from the get-go, but because I was usually working full-time on a project, on a contract, I was doing that late in the evenings when I could, but really often mostly on weekends. And it was something that I was able to do in addition to continue to get the hours needed to get the certification and all of those things, but really to start to get more experience, to work with different people, to try different techniques, to figure out kind of how I wanted to blend some of the skills that I was learning with some of the knowledge that I had about what was happening on the ground. So it was probably in about 2019. I was working one of my most arduous houred jobs, and I was exhausted. I was coaching on the weekends. I was working late nights. And I realized that if I really wanted to grow my coaching business and spend time doing the quality work that I knew that was possible, I needed to do it in a capacity that wasn't just on nights and weekends. Not only was that not giving me enough impact in the area that I wanted to grow on my business, but it wasn't something that was sustainable. So probably right before the pandemic, I decided that I wanted to go full time, and I took the leap and decided that I would spend time not only working in my business, but on my business to grow it to really what it is today.
Interesting. I love that. You were able to put in the reps, the focus on something that I think we should highlight. It is like at the start, we really learn a lot from the coachees as well. And you really start to understand your own practice. So it really is about putting in the work so you can have a sense of things. So I really like that you focused on that and highlighted that, the repetition and putting out the work, even if it's a side, like considering a side hustle, but at the same time, you're growing with it, right? And then you're building up your practice. So I really like that. So once you were, out there helping people, who did you naturally end up attracting? When did you realize, yeah, these are the people that I work best with? Because in the coaching space, we see a lot of coaches trying to embrace the entire world. And I'm not saying that's a wrong thing or a bad thing. I'm just trying to understand if you ended up niching down or you were trying to test waters and understand what's your ideal, client profile or something like that.
Yeah, no, it is such a thing. They talk about it a lot about niching down, how it is important to really decide kind of who your target is. When I first started coaching, I really initially thought that I would work with people who were the kinds of people that I worked with in my professional career. I came from that background. I understood it, and I really helped with those people. During my coach training, you're exposed to a lot of different areas of coaching. And I realized a couple things. So one is we're always coaching the whole person. So even though I'm an executive and leadership coach, it is almost never that I don't talk about what is happening with people's personal lives, what's happening with transition, all of those things. And so it's great to have that background and experience. What I also realized is that I do like to work with the kinds of people that I used to work with. I come from a very tech background. I come from a fast-paced environment background. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to go back into sort of the problematic areas of those environments. That was something that would still light me up. And it turns out when it finally dawned on me was that I was reading articles in my spare time and actually interested in the subject matter. So when it came to things like busy workloads, managing up, executive presence, those were topics that I was actually still really excited about and wanted to continue to shift that lens to. So knowing that that was something that I naturally was interested in and wasn't something that I felt I had to do just because those were my people or who I thought of as my people made me realize that that was a space that I wanted to stay really plugged into.
I really like that. The fact that oh, is this work? You're like, I'm having fun doing this. So yeah, 100%. And I think you need to have to bring up that joy, that fun factor, right? So it's not something that's dragging you. So yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, we all know work is not always fun, but I think we have more control to lean into more of those things than light us up than we probably think we do. And so paying attention to those things and incorporating why this is important to me, why this is something that I think is something we need in the world are things that really keep me really drawn and engaged to the work.
Okay. Now let's zoom out for a second. Like if someone ends up working with you today, how do they usually find their way to you in the first place?
Yeah. So such a great question and one that all of us business owners are focused on. So when I first starting in this work, it was all referrals. So I had a really robust network. I'd worked at a lot of big companies. And so everybody that I knew was now working at another big company. And so as I started talking more and more about the work that I was doing, both the coaching and the team facilitation, which is something I'd done in my role a lot anyhow. It was really natural for people to ask me, oh, can we work together? Is that something that we can do? As time went on, I realized that I wanted to be more intentional about reaching out to people who could benefit from what I do that I didn't already know. And so I started doing things like speaking, which is a great way to help spread the message and help people get to know me and what I do and what I'm about. I do a series of panels where I bring people together so that I'm always offering some interesting content to get in front of people. Of course, I have things like an email list. I am on social media so that I'm continuing that conversation. And so that I'm letting people know that there are things that I can offer before we're ready to work with, if we're ready to work together, and then continuing on.
Interesting. Now, let's talk about the mechanics behind the scenes for a moment, right? So, people find you through referrals, panels, the email list, the social media. They engage with your content. So, when someone decides to work with you, what does that actually look like from their perspective?
Yeah. So again, I think it's a little bit murky for people. So I love that we're kind of talking about this and detailing it out. So first of all, we have a conversation. So we get on a call, we get on a Zoom, and we really talk about what somebody's looking for, what their challenges are, why now is the time that they're looking to do something different. And so that I can talk a little bit more about what coaching is, what coaching isn't, and the ways that I like to work with people. I can share some of the ways that I do that. Again, I do one-on-one coaching, which is again more of us getting on the Zoom on a regular basis. I have a membership that I created, which is more asynchronous so that people can ask me questions really whenever anything comes up and continue to have that contact and that high touch without that in-person time. And then of course, I work with teams. I do a ton of workshops. And so I have some that are set that we can talk about, or a lot of times what I do is I customize what a team is really looking for and then talking about how we can continue to work together to make sure that we're not just talking about what we could do, but we're actually figuring out how to do it.
Mm. I mean, your work seems pretty involved, Dana. We're talking about group coaching. I'm not sure if it's exactly group coaching or training a team. We're talking about somewhat of a custom experience. On top of that, managing everything on behind the curtain. So, how do you think about managing your time and energy so the business doesn't start owning you?
Yeah. Such a great question. It's so funny because one of the reasons I stopped doing the work that I was doing before was because I hadn't figured out how to be really effective with my time and still really balanced so that I could bring my whole better self to work. It's one of the things that I work with so many of my clients on today. And when I started working for myself, I slipped into old patterns. I slipped into those old habits where now I'm not just working for somebody else. This is my business. This is really important to me. The work is really important to me and it's my livelihood. So it's really important to me to do that. And figuring out what are the tasks? What is the time that's really going to be effective in what I'm trying to do is critical. So it really is a lot of that clarity work. So what am I trying to do? What are the ways that are most effective for me to, again, reach out to people? I could spend all of my time marketing my business, but I don't have the time to also do my business if that's what I'm doing. So I'm really strategic and I do a lot of planning, a lot of evaluation, and a lot of refocusing about where I'm spending my time. I'm also not afraid to look for external support. So I have people who help me out with the things that are not the coaching that I need to be the one who's delivering that. So if I have somebody who is doing my books, if I have somebody who is helping me with my marketing, if I have somebody who's helping me with administration, those are all tasks that I can outsource so that my focus can be where it truly is the most important.
Okay, and I want to tap into your experience a little bit here right now, because I think this is a hot topic. And you mentioned you were doing like in the weekends, your coaching practice. So I want to hear from you. That's the exact reason, because pricing and offers are things every coach evolves on, and we're not talking about hard numbers, right? I'm just talking about, that self worth path. So How do you approach that now? And what did you have to learn the hard way to get where you are right now?
Yeah, I think that pricing it's a really critical decision. The thing that really changed for me is there's not a right or a wrong price. And if you go out with a price, you're not necessarily making a mistake. You're testing out circumstance. It's funny in a lot of the coaching groups, people will occasionally ask questions about like, what should I charge? And a lot of the feedback is like, what feels good to you? With a very coaching supportive voice. But what it really is it's looking at the market. So what are coaches charging? What is the range? And I will tell you, it goes from $5 to $5,000 for like an increment of your time. So it's really hard to tell in some of those areas, but you can start to develop some baselines about what coaching costs. And again, it costs different things for different results, for different target audiences that you're speaking to, because it's not about your value. It's about what people feel the value is to them. And are they willing to pay for it? So you have to think about, what problem am I solving? What is it worth to these people that I'm working with? Do they have the money? Do they value investing in these things? And then there's the reality of it. So I do one-on-one coaching, which is more expensive because it takes more of my time and energy to do that. You're not only going to get more quality time, you're going to get quicker results because we're really going to get to the crux of the matter. I also, as I mentioned, offer a membership. The membership is pretty high touch because you can ask me as many questions as you want, but it's not this one-on-one support. So I'm not always going to pick up on the nuances of the situation. It might take us a little longer with back and forth with going through some of those things. But it's also not going to cost as much because one of those things is the value that people are getting, but also we are a limited resource. And so we have to think about, how much time do I have to vote to my clients? How much am I charging for that time? Is that valuable to them? And does it support me so that I can earn a living, so that I continue to support the people that I want to help?
I love how you touch the reality aspect to it, grounding the price of that theme. And of course, you have to be comfortable with it, but it's just like, what does that mean? At the end of the day, I need to come up with the number, I need to get into a reality aspect and send them, a proper offer so I can understand where I'm coming from. So does it help where I'm coming from? Yeah, kind of, but not really, right? So that's interesting you brought it up. Now, looking forward, Dana, looking forward a bit. What's the direction you're aiming this business towards? Are you thinking more about growth, leverage, building a team? I mean, you already have one, but increasing or refining what already works? What feels most exciting right?
Yeah. So I always spend a lot of time at the beginning of the year doing, again, a lot of that reflection and that visioning about where I want to be going with my business. I spent a lot of energy last year doing things like launching my membership, which was a new piece of my business. And the reason I launched that membership is because I was hearing from my clients that there was a need that they weren't necessarily seeing a solution for. And so I catered a new offer that was available to that. So that's always something that I'm also doing as well. Listening to, what are people asking for? When people aren't interested in coaching, why is that? Is it because they can't use the help? Or is it because there's something about the model that isn't working for them? So as I'm continuing to grow my business, it's so important to me that I'm listening to the shifts that are happening in the economy, in the market, all of those things, as well as what's lighting me up? What do I feel like is having a big impact? One of the things that I'm starting to focus a little bit more on moving forward is getting back to more in-person workshops with teams. It's something that really went away during the pandemic. Of course, there was a virtual aspect of that, but there really is a power of getting a team together to do some of that work. It is more time intensive. But again, I think we look at the benefit of investing some of that time into doing that and then figuring out, how do we want to grow that moving forward? So once we do a workshop and we talk about a topic that's really Maybe we're starting with strategy, for example, and we're talking about what are the projects that we're really working on? What's important? The same work that we're doing ourselves about what's important, we're doing with the team and looking at, okay, how do we make sure that everybody's focused on the right things in the organization? But then it's figuring out, I don't want to leave it at that. I want to figure out, how do I help the team grow with this and respond to the constant changes that are happening in the world? So it's figuring out how I can have those scalable options that allow me to have the biggest impact and then grow with the team and then be able to continue to support, with maybe something that's not as time intensive. And for sure, that's going to continue to involve adding new people to the team and support as I figure out which are the pieces that I really want to be the most involved in and which are the pieces that as a process can be something that other people can handle.
Sounds like a fine balance, right? You're an advocate of burnout against burnout, but at the same time, you want to impact more people, right? We're on
Yep.
the same page here. But
Yes.
so you need to be very careful, very intentional about where you're going because you don't want to contradict yourself, right?
Right.
I don't want to burn out Dana. I don't want
I
to
want
burn
to walk
myself.
the talk.
Exactly. But at the same time, yes, I need to help more people. So yeah, fine balance. Okay. Interesting. I love that. And even when things are going well, there's always something under construction. What's the main thing you're actively working on or trying to improve in the business right now?
Yeah. So the main thing that I have been focused on and sort of my Q1 project is really, as I mentioned, I've been doing a lot of custom workshops. So I really listen to people. We sit down, we figure out what the team needs. But what I realized is that there were a few themes that were happening again and again. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to standardize those offerings, one, so that I could keep refining kind of what was the best impact on some of those pieces, but also so that I could talk about it, so that I can market those few things that are coming up again and again. I can let people know that I'm hearing the problems that you're having and I have a solution that I think might be a good fit for you.
Interesting. Okay. I want to tap into your experience a little bit right now because, there's advice all over the place, especially online and especially with after COVID, right? When we were talking about that. And you've been around long enough to see trends come and go. And people give business advice nonstop. So what's something you hear repeated a lot that you think people misunderstand or overvalue?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that what comes to mind as I think about that is people are always thinking that I need to learn more in order to do more. And I think you need to do more in order to learn more. So it's really not a matter of, yes, there is a foundational knowledge. I got my coaching certificate because I thought it was really important to have that foundation. Once we got beyond that foundation, it was really tempting to say, okay, what am I missing now? So what do I want to learn now? And while I am a lifelong learner and I will continue to do that, if you're not out there talking to people, working with people, testing things, you're not really going to learn what you need to learn.
I really like that. And I'm going to tell you why. I see a lot of people talking about outsourcing, right? Especially in the coaching space. Like you should focus in your zone of genius, which is absolutely correct. But somewhat, I see a lot of coaches being too fast on a hire. Okay. They hire too fast towards something they don't entirely have an understanding of the task itself. So they're not very good closers, for example, and they're hiring their first closer without having a VA or a EA or even someone helping with the marketing piece. And they're pulling up the gun too soon and they don't actually know exactly what it takes to close or don't know exactly what it takes for task X, Y, and Z, And you nailed it. They need to experience a little bit before they outsource something to have not that they need to know exactly what it happens, but to have a sense of things so they don't hire someone that they know how to track even. I don't even know how to track X, Y, Z. I don't even know how to track my VA, my EA, and now I have this person as a 40-hour full-time employee and I don't even know how to grasp it. Is that something you have seen already happen in
Yeah,
colleagues?
absolutely. I think it's such a good point. And it's funny because it's one of the things that as I work with a lot of leaders, people are always talking about like, how do I manage people who are doing things that I'm not necessarily doing? And so I agree. It's not that you need to know everything. There is a time and a place where you want to hire an expert. But there are some things that you want to be a part of. You want to make sure you're understanding. You want to make sure you're the person who's providing the direction and the goal, that you're understanding what the tracking is, what the metrics are. How do you know that this is working? How do you know when it's not? Are you both on the same page as to what you're really trying to accomplish so that you can continue to have those conversations? It's funny, when I was speaking to somebody about hiring a VA, one of the conversations we had is that I want somebody who over communicates with me, because yes, I want to trust you that you're able to go off and do this task, but I want to know what I don't know. I want to know what I don't know about what's happening, so that, again, we can start to figure out what some of those frameworks are that we need to do. If you're making decisions, I do want to get to the point where you're able to make those decisions, but let's make some of those decisions together to start with, so that we're both on the same page as to what we're deciding and why.
Exactly. That makes perfect sense. And on the flip side, what's something boring or not as hyped that you wish more people actually paid attention?
Yeah. So for me, one of the foundational things people will start to laugh is planning and reflection. So I am a big proponent of really thinking about, as I mentioned, in the new year, it doesn't have to be the new year, but picking a time where we're thinking long term, where we're doing reflection. What has been working for us? What hasn't been working for us? And where do we want to go? Not necessarily because we're going to map out every moment to, the finest detail and we're going to explicitly follow that path, but we need to make sure that we're clear on what our North Star is. And then we need to take that process into a regular framework. So is it a month review plus a week review plus a day review? It starts to sound like a lot of process, but really what it is it's just taking those moments. You talked earlier about how important it is to be intentional with your time. And that's what it is. We're the best source of what's working for us and what's not. But if we don't take the time to really reflect on that and plan forward, we're wasting all of that experience and that knowledge that we're getting.
Oh my God. Dana, you have a camera here in my house, I suppose, because I was like, I like to break two things so I can understand. First one is I like the one big thing concept, right? Like in the work
Yep.
and in my personal life. And I had my personal life, for example, let's say is losing weight. Okay. So I'm like, whenever I say yes to something, what am I saying no to? Right. So it brings back to intention. It's like, Pedro, you want to lose weight, man. What you doing? Right. So don't order that pizza. Yeah, but I love it so much, but don't do it, man. So it's like that internal battle. It's like, it is a reflection because it brings you up to the intention. And then you're like, yeah, I shouldn't be doing that. In that exact moment, if you have that awareness, it sounds like that was something you were telling me right now. It's like, have that awareness, reflect on that so you can have clarity on moving forward and also track it.
Yeah.
Because that's so important.
That's such
right?
a good example. And it applies to so many areas of our advice. You were crystal clear. If my goal is to lose weight, what does that look like? What does that mean for my behaviors? What are the things that feed into that? And what are the things that don't? And when are the moments where that's really hard for me? So, if that pizza's in front of me, I know there's going to be a pizza or something else in front of me again. So how do I want to respond to that circumstance? What am I learning from those experiences so that I can build my life in a way that's going to support the goals that I say are really important to me? And the more that we do that with very few things, I agree, we can't spread ourselves too thin or we lose that ability to be intentional about it. It just gets abstract. If we want to move forward on one thing, maybe up to 3 things, but we can't spread ourselves too thin or we just end up reacting to things and not actually moving forward in the areas that we say are important to us.
And we're so good at procrastinating,
Okay.
right? We're like, I am doing something productive. At reality, it's really not, but you're like, feel like, yeah, no, I didn't hit the gym yet, but I'm like, I bought the right shoes, I mean, I talked to them last week and they're saying they're going to get back to me with a discount. I'm working on it, but actually, did I exercise? Not really, so I think that piece is so important because, and when I say this, I say because I do it, I think everyone does it to a certain level, right?
We all do it. And that's the thing is we're not bad people. We're not lazy people. We are humans. And I've spent a lot of time studying brain science because I think it's so important for us to really understand how we as humans work by default. And so once you start to understand that, then you can start to leverage some of the things that'll make all of those things work easier for you. We're all going to have moments. If this were easy, we'd all be doing it. But it is a lifelong process, and we're going to keep learning new things, and we're going to keep trying new things. I think that's where it comes back to having those sort of set systems where we're rechecking. Because if a week goes by and I didn't work at all on my goal, I need to acknowledge that and ask myself really why, what happened, and how do I want to change that moving forward, knowing what's been successful for me in the past.
I love that. I love the fact that you use the word easy, because I think there's a clear distinction between easy and simple.
Yes.
Because if easy, like for example, losing weight again, you have like an epidemic in the United States of people that are overweight, right? It's pretty easy to understand the concept. You eat less than you should, outtake of calories, all of that, blah, blah, blah. That's pretty easy. I'm sorry, that's pretty simple,
Yes.
but that's not easy.
Yeah.
Right?
Or we'd all be doing it.
Exactly. Or that would be a problem that were already solved. I mean, it's simple, but not easy. Definitely. That makes a lot of sense. Before we close this out, if someone resonated with what you shared and wants to follow your work, Dana, where should they go?
Absolutely. Well, you can find all of my information at danazellers.com, my website. You can find a link, find more information. We can talk more. And of course, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So give me a follow there, and I would love to connect.
There were a few moments, I would say, from this conversation that really stood out to me. Well, first of all, you're calling out on the other coaches about pricing. I love that. I love being so direct, on, hey, you know what? Yeah, it needs to be from a perspective that I'm comfortable with, but that doesn't really answer my question. We need to understand where do I come from scratch to gather actually a price point, because that's so important, right? You can undervalue yourself by having the wrong price point, and having a sense of the market makes perfect sense, And also, I would say, and I'm just stealing this from you as another quote.
Please do.
Quote is like, we always coach the whole person. That is so true. I'm also a coach, a career coach. And one of my first clients, I was like, okay, I created this process, mock interview, blah, 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 all of that, cover letter and all of that. And one of my first points, I was like 10 minutes in a one-on-one session. I'm like, okay, this first paragraph in the cover letter, you're going to talk about something, curious about you, like personal side, a bit fun, that you do and all of that, but it doesn't have to be too long, kind of interesting. And it was like, you know what, man, I'm not interesting. And I'm like, oh my God, so I was thinking about the process itself, but it's like you said, you coach the whole person. It's not that simple, just like that. And I love the fact that you also mentioned how you slip into old habits, and how that can be something you will always be fighting with, and we all are. It's not easy, it brings back to the same old stuff. We're like, sometimes we ran to our comfortable zone, and we're like just being human at the end of the day.
That's being human.
Dana, I really appreciate you taking the time and being open with this. It was great having you on.
Thank you so much for having me. This was such a fun conversation, and I know you provide so much value to your viewers. I was glad to be a part of it.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This podcast was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, or even $100,000 weeks, all without burning out and making sure that you're making the impact and having the life that you want. To learn more about our community and how we can help you, visit joinpurplecircle.com.